Rain lashed across the conference room glass. The air conditioner hummed like a sigh. I stood behind the row of leather chairs, looked out at Midtown awash in lights, and clearly heard that line pop out in the middle of the all-hands. "You're just a nanny." Forced laughter ran a loop around the room. The CEO nameplate sat askew, the head chair at the table empty like a patch of sky no one dared to sit in. I set the envelope down in that very spot to remind everyone. An empty chair decides nothing. Bylaws and timestamps decide. In New York, words have value, but I learned early one thing: paperwork is the law. I set the FedEx envelope on the table, the red stamp, Court of Chancery, the timestamp still wet. No explanation, no raised voice. I told myself, I have 2 weeks to teach them a lesson. From now on, everything will be said in writing. No arguing, only working by paper. Night backstage at Radio City Music Hall, the stage manager leaned in. Executive session, now. I tightened my grip on the stock ledger and trust instruction folder, remembering the sealed instructions held by the entity keeping the share ledger. Tonight, I said very softly, they will relearn the definition of owner. The chair of the board stepped into the lights. My husband and mother-in-law sat in the front row, the auditorium compressed as before a storm. When the words, "The board will convene an executive session," rang out, time seemed to stand still. In a frozen frame, I saw their faces change, and saw that I was no longer small in my own story. I tell this not to boast of victory, but to record how I walked through cold rooms. Breathe deep, keep calm, call the truth by its right name. Welcome to Revenge and Resolve, where we heal with gentle discipline and reclaim fairness with evidence that speaks. Thank you for being here with me. If you want to see the turn of the sealed letter and the ballot in the rain, stay to the end. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. Hit like if you stand with the truth, and comment owner so I know you're in the same row. Do you want to understand why the name Harper Design Group LLC could jump out of thin air? I will rewind time a few weeks before Thanksgiving. Mornings in Highland Park always smell of polished wood and leather. In the room hung with cowboy art and photos of the ranch across 4 seasons, I often stand and look at my dad's old spurs, Jack's, hanging next to the frame of him on horseback at first light. I am Harper. I do wood design. My small studio in Deep Ellum is always full of materials: walnut slabs propped against the wall, steel rulers, wood clamps, and a sketchbook with frayed edges because I carry it everywhere. On Saturday mornings, I run over to Bishop Arts to choose the best boards, sip a strong coffee, and sketch simple live lines for a new table as I walk. On Sundays, I go back to the ranch to check the horse stalls with my dad, smelling hay, hearing the creak of the saddle, and watching the foals run in circles like daytime fireworks. Dad still calls me daughter of wind and wood, then laughs. Girl, after you finish designing the horse stalls for me, remember to get back to Dallas early. This Thanksgiving, I have a family announcement. I look at his sun-browned hands, my heart softening like wood just misted. At noon on the ranch, we sit on the steps, eat hot brisket tacos, the spicy sauce making my eyes sting too, but I still smile because I know I'm in the right place for me. As evening falls, I drive back toward the city, past the tall power poles, past the cotton fields, and through stretches of quiet where only the radio and ideas for a new hanging shelf slip in. I always feel most at peace when my hands still have sawdust on them, my shirt still carries the smell of coffee, and my sketchbook holds strokes that don't need anyone's praise. At the big house, Cole, my older brother, greeted me with a pat on the shoulder that was both warm and hurried. "Don't worry, I'll handle your petty tax paperwork." On the console table, a white mailer lay still, The corner stamped CP 2000. I glanced at it, and then Cole deftly pushed it into the drawer, saying, "Let me keep that for you." Savannah, Cole's wife, does community PR, very close to the Society page press, and always knows which photo will be published. Trent, the CFO of the family office, is usually the one who goes with Cole whenever the family has paperwork. I listened and said, lightly, not because I believed it all, but because I didn't want to argue on a gentle afternoon. Paperwork has always been like that. He does finance, speaks crisply, everyone believes him. As for me, I'm used to reading wood with my eyes and listening to wind with my chest. Numbers sometimes come to me like temperamental horses. They take time to understand. I told myself I'd ask again tomorrow, then went to my room, took off my boots, opened my sketchbook, and kept drawing a recessed staircase for the kitchen. Deep Ellum Studio at night is a different world. I turn on the warm lights, switch on the ceiling fan, and listen to Dallas breathe through the window. The long boards line up like musical notes. I lay my hand on each grain and feel it warm. On Saturday, I run the Bishop Art streets to find Walnut. On Sunday, I go back to the West Texas ranch to check the horse stalls with Dad. That is the rhythm I choose, simple and straight like a good joinery joint. I don't want to be rich by walls or chandeliers. I want to be rich by durable pieces, by shared Tex-Mex lunches, and by being called by the right name in my own house. At night, I set the sketchbook next to the white envelope, the hesitation of an otherwise calm day. I gently pushed it out of the drawer, and somewhere inside me a small nail tapped, a warning sound. But then the phone vibrated. Dad texted a reminder about the Thanksgiving gathering, telling me not to be late. I turned off the studio lights, locked up, and stepped out to the street. Deep Ellum still had live music drifting from a bar. In my head, Dad's horse stall project was half done. The rest was the reunion dinner, where everyone raises a glass and says what they think is good for each other. I didn't know that a single phone call would shatter that calm mold. At that time, I was still just Harper, standing between wood and wind, believing that if I lived decently, then the paperwork would line up as straight as a beautiful grain. That day, description began to turn into a weapon, and I answered only in writing, the all-hands meeting email dropping into my inbox like a crookedly pasted poster. Familiar contents. Quarterly update, new targets. But in the final note line were words cold as a needle. Spouses, nannies, use service door. I read slowly, 3 times, then set the phone down on the table as if laying down a safety pin. Small, but sharp. Here, the word nanny doesn't speak about a profession. It speaks about the position they want to stuff me into. I took a screenshot, didn't reply, just sat a few more minutes to hear my heartbeat return to its normal rhythm. In media, description is a weapon. I've known that since the first day I stepped into the station, and today, I saw the barrel. At noon, the board meeting schedule suddenly changed at the last minute. Another email arrived just as I stepped into the elevator. Meeting room changed to 27B, starting 15 minutes early. I ran down the corridor, pressed my access card to the gate, and it beeped red. The guard looked at my name, embarrassed. "Sorry, your card has been downgraded." I smiled a thank you, withdrew like pulling a knife away from the dining table so as not to scratch anyone. I am an invited beneficiary, not a stranger. But doors don't distinguish reasoning, they read permissions. I stood outside the glass, glimpsed familiar figures, heard chairs scrape, watched the clock move, my heart calm as water before the wind. If they want me to miss the room, I will let them stamp their fingerprints clearly on every change. Then Slack leaked a short clip, recorded from rehearsal. my husband joking half seriously, half teasing, his voice popping out like a stifled hiccup. Nanny's got opinions. The laughter in response was as thin as gift wrap. I watched it once, didn't rewind, then closed the screen. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I understood that clip is them writing the lead-in for another broadcast that will air in a way they cannot control. In the newsroom, representatives from SAG-AFTRA and IATSE dropped by, exhausted from shoots being cut and family meddling, wedging in like an invisible chokehold. I sat and listened, wrote down a few things they needed: stable schedules, creative decisions not changed at the doorway of the family breakfast room. I promised to pass them to HRBP and the chair of the board, without adding or subtracting. There are sighs that don't need a microphone. They move down the hallway, settle on the rim of paper cups. And if you stand still long enough, you can hear them. At the end of the day, I went down to the garage to pick up a prop box I wanted to bring over to the digital studio to support the young team. My vendor pass had been downgraded. The door card didn't open even on the third swipe. An intern ran over to help, knocking from the inside. I thanked them, went in, set the panini box down, and noticed a memo pinned on the board. Props in out must have approval from Family Affairs. I smiled a goodbye, headed to the elevator and sent a short, emotionless email. Please confirm the new procedure. I didn't argue, just asked for documentation. Paper is the most durable voice in this city. At night, I went back to Tribeca, hung my blazer on the chair, washed my face under cold water to rinse off the hallway smell. I opened my notebook and wrote down the day's milestones. 1. All hands with the note. Spouses, nannies use service door. 2. Board schedule changed at the last minute. 3. Card downgraded. 4. Nannies got opinions. Clip on Slack. 5. Unions complaining about cut shifts and family interference. 6. Memo Family Affairs holding the prop store. Each line is a small nail hammered into a board. I hammer slowly so it won't warp. I remembered my grandfather's words. Ownership is the real microphone. I added my own. Don't grab the mic, let people speak into it themselves. Before sleeping, I printed the important emails and put them into plastic sleeves, placed one copy in the small safe. Another sent to the General Counsel with the line, "Please review which bylaws apply to access and invitations to meetings." I typed a message to the chair of the board. Tomorrow I will be there on time. If they change rooms, I will stand at the glass door. He replied with a single dot, like a nod. I exhaled. In media, description is a weapon. They have painted me as a tag-along nanny. I'll leave it as is, to let them write the indictment themselves. As for me, I will stay silent, put the papers in order, and wait until the Radio City lights come up. Then the only voice I need will come from an envelope with a timestamp. Rain rolled down the glass in the afternoon. In the small conference room, the papers began to stand in line. The General Counsel GC texted me to come down to the small meeting room overlooking the gray rooftops. He closed the door, set in front of me a thin leather folder, the stock ledger with the names printed in neat rows, an ownership ratio table drawn like a traffic map, and a trust indenture accompanied by a letter of wishes written by my grandfather. Slanted yet firm handwriting that spelled out the spirit, "Keep the station in the hands of those who understand it from the foundation up." His voice was low and even. You are the named beneficiary. I have a duty to let you know what you own, and to make the board understand that bylaws are not for decoration. I touched the smooth paper and felt like I was touching a wooden bridge that had lain in the sun, warm and real. The GC continued. The Share Transfer Department has also forwarded the instruction kept under seal if a for-cause event occurs. Put simply, misconduct that causes harm, Then your special voting rights will switch on by themselves like a light. No one needs to defer to anyone. The clause alone is enough. He gave me the phone number of the person in charge, quietly instructed. Call to confirm on speaker and log the time. I nodded, dialed. The person on the other end confirmed there was a deposit instruction from when my grandfather was still alive, sealed at their office, last updated right before I returned to the station. I wrote one line in my notebook. Rights switch on upon misconduct. Verified. The GC didn't look away as he slid another stack closer to me. The forensics compilation. No flowery words, just color printouts of subject lines, timestamps, senders. A memo from Family Affairs instructed the downgrading of my door card, with wording half joking, half barbed. Avoid brand risk due to family interference. Another email told HR to adjust entry to the service door for spouses, us nannies. I read. My stomach cooled, but my hands didn't shake. Each character turned into a nail, hammered into the timeline board in my head. We've retained the originals on the server, the GC said, and stand ready to authenticate before the board. I only nodded. Outside, the rain tapped lightly on the window ledge as if counting beats. That evening, the union's attorney stopped by the studio and set a yellow envelope on my desk. A grievance for a hostile environment related to the nanny remark. They didn't say much, just tapped a finger on the final sentence. Request board-level review, as this statement affects team morale and the shooting schedule. I thanked them, signed for it, and asked permission to photograph it. In that moment, I saw the sighs in the edit room, the scrambled shifts, and the strained laughter in the Slack clip, all merge into a single line: culture. And the law still lay quiet on paper, waiting for the right person to call its name. I took everything back to the Tribeca apartment and laid it out on the long table, the stock ledger folder, the ratio table, the trust indenture, the letter of wishes, the sealed instruction from the transfer agent, the printed memo downgrading access, the service door email, the union grievance. I labeled each sheet with tags A, B, C, logged the times in pencil, photographed backups, then put them into 2 identical hard folders. One to stay in the small safe, one to send by registered mail to the office of the chair of the board in the morning. The phone lit up. A text from my mother-in-law, a gallery-hanging invitation with a heart emoji. I set the phone face down and listened to my heart grow quieter. They think I'm mute because I'm weak. In fact, I'm silent because I'm counting papers. I got up, topped off the plant's water, watched the rain thin outside the window. My grandfather used to say, "In media, ownership is the real microphone." I add for myself, the microphone switches on by calm. Tomorrow, when the envelope with a timestamp is set down on the glass table, I won't raise my voice. I will say 3 words. Please read. And let the letters do the rest. That afternoon's town hall was as crowded as payday, the white light sweeping across the rows of seats making everyone look more tired than usual. I stood up from the 3rd row, held the mic with both hands so I wouldn't shake, and asked a simple question. Will the budget for the newsroom next quarter keep enough shifts? The team is short-staffed. I want to know the number to schedule. I spoke slowly, clearly, as I had practiced in front of the mirror. Before I could hear the answer, my husband stepped down from the podium, yanked the mic, smiling as if there had never been a storm. This is for leadership, not the nanny. A smattering of whistles, a few awkward laughs. I stood still for a very long beat so that sentence could fall to the floor and lie still like a nail dropped from a plank. Then I nodded, returned the mic, and sat down. I chose not to argue under ceiling lights and cameras. I chose to remember. That night, a short clip leaked onto a trade site. The little internal source labels danced like soda foam. My inbox ticked up. An advertiser messaged exactly 3 words: brand safety, like a hard question mark. The head of sales pinged me with a pale face emoji. PR sent a draft, no comment, then deleted it. I read each line with slow eyes, set the phone down midway to pour water, then picked it up to keep reading. Not angry, not gleeful, just seeing a story find its way into the light in true New York fashion. Fast, cold, and deferential to no one. The next morning, the bank called privately, the manager's voice soft but firm. A proposal to move the family fund into a new vehicle has just been submitted. The requester is Mrs. Please confirm, as there are signs of conflict with the current trust. I thanked her and asked for a record. When the email arrived, I printed it and clipped it with the stock ledger and trust instruction folder. Another brick fell into the right row. At noon, the CFO walked into the chair's office. The door closed for 10 minutes and then opened with a short sentence. I refuse to sign the new 10b5-1 automatic trading plan. The governance risk is too high in the current context. No one in the hallway dared raise their voice, but I clearly heard someone's teeth faintly grind like an off note. Slack kept bubbling. The union rep sent a formal document about a hostile environment. The edit team requested keeping the full conference room logs as evidence. HR pinged a culture roll call for next week. I passed the copy room. The panini smelled wonderful and no one touched it. A young editor looked at me, lips mouthing, "You okay?" I nodded. "I'm okay." In media, description is a weapon. Today, they described themselves more clearly than any press release. I stepped out of the hall just as the sky dumped rain. Wind slammed the glass, making Midtown blur like a frame not yet rendered. I didn't look back. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the name saved in block letters, Delaware Counsel. 3 rings. A low female voice picked up. "I need to file an emergency petition," I said, "with the stock ledger, cap table, trust indenture, transfer agent instructions, the internal memo downgrading access, and the union grievance." The other side paused a beat, then replied, "I hear you clearly. Send all scans, timestamp them, and will ask the court to maintain the status quo, review the bylaws, and if necessary, convene an executive session under the bylaws." I stood under the awning, rain splashing my wrist, the chill waking me like the day's first coffee. I texted the GC a line, calling Delaware. Attached a photo of the prepared Court of Chancery emergency envelope, and sent the chair of the board exactly 3 words: "Please read." That night, I went back to Tribeca, took off my blazer, and set it over the back of the chair like laying down a shell. I gathered the printouts and arranged them in order. 1. The town hall clip. 2. The trade press email. 3. The advertiser's brand safety text. 4. The bank's alert about a new vehicle. 5. The refusal to sign the stock plan. 6. The union complaint. I labeled them AF, clipped them into a hard folder, and breathed slowly. I don't need to shout for anyone to understand me. I just need to keep the tempo, keep the papers, and knock on the right door. In New York, words have value, but paperwork is the law. Today, I chose the language of the law. And tomorrow, when the envelope with a timestamp is placed on the glass table, I will walk in, stand straight, and let the last 3 words do their work. The court will review. We sat around a long wooden table in a small conference room, looking out over gray rooftops. No stage lights, no cameras, only paper, pens, and people who knew how to listen. The general counsel set in front of me a dog-eared copy of the bylaws. The Delaware attorney opened a laptop, laying out the pages to be tabbed like bracing the spine of an old book. The trustee clutched a leather binder. The transfer agent held a sealed envelope. The forensic accountant nodded a slight greeting. The union attorney brought a stack of numbered grievances. "We go in order," the GC said, voice flat as a lake. "Read the bylaws, record the rights that have been encroached, draft a petition asking the court to maintain the status quo. Don't let anyone touch the records or the shares." No one spoke louder than anyone else. We moved step by step, like measuring planks, cutting planks, fitting joints. At noon, the Delaware attorney pointed to a small line. "An executive session of the board must exclude any insider with a conflict." She tapped her pen on the edge of the table. "We will request such a session, with full minutes. At the same time, prepare an emergency request, a stop order, so no one deletes logs, changes permissions, or transfers shares overnight." I nodded, feeling in my chest a quiet I had practiced for many months. Breathe slowly, read carefully, don't shorten the path. In the afternoon, we moved on to witnesses. The showrunner sent a concise account. The stage manager confirmed the line he heard backstage. HR provided check-in and check-out times. The union representative compiled messages about Nanny from Slack and internal email. The AV tech in the control room extracted an audio clip from the sound booth. Low volume but clear, unmistakable. I listened once, only once, then set the headphones down. "Enough," I said, "so no one has to argue one-on-one." In the evening, another corner lit up. Communication strategy. We wrote a script for the case my husband pushes back. A calm draft. No personal attacks. Only a reminder of principles. Respect workers, no disparagement, and decisions will belong to process. "If there's an interview?" someone asked. "No," said the Delaware attorney. "The court record will be the answer." I smiled. Sometimes silence isn't weakness, but a way to choose a bigger microphone. When everyone thought we were done, the trustee set the transfer agent's sealed envelope on the table. "Instructions on deposit from my grandfather's time," he said, pulling out a short sheet. "If conduct deemed for cause occurs, abuse of authority, harm to reputation and operations, then the special voting power shifts to me, immediately, per the instructions signed and recorded. No ceremony needed. Just press a button." The transfer agent confirmed over speakerphone, noted the time, and read out the document number and last update date. I remember holding the water glass with both hands so it wouldn't spill, not because I was afraid, but because I understood a very heavy door was opening. The forensic accountant added a diagram, the changes to access permissions, HR's directive to downgrade my badge, the brand risk note alongside the word Nanny. Everything was numbered, stapled, and backed up in 2 places. The union attorney slid me another thin packet. "Hostile environment complaint. Request board review." I put it on top. In the silence, I heard the sound of pens underlining, folders rubbing the table, the steady breathing of people who weren't performing. At night, we did a final pass. The bylaws allow executive session excluding interested persons. The emergency motion papers were finished. The witness list was time-stamped. The Nanny recording sealed. The communication script only 1 page, and a single press would activate the special voting power per the deposit instructions. I looked at it all, like looking at a bridge already built across murky water. Not a drumbeat. Just papers that know how to stand upright. I left the room, the rain still tapping on the window frame, Midtown glittering like a light board in a studio. In Delaware, I told myself, justice for a company is measured in votes and a court seal. I pulled on my coat, flipped the collar up, and felt my steps firm up by half a beat. Tomorrow, when we set the time-stamped envelope on the glass table, I won't recount who called me what. I will say, Please vote. And let the seal answer. In the days after that, I stepped into a new rhythm of life. In the morning, in a small conference room overlooking the park, I sat beside the independent chair to take a crash course in how to run a board. Not with grand words, but with compact questions. Who has the right to decide? When to stand to call for a vote? And how to make the minutes say exactly what happened. He drew me a simple diagram like a subway map, point A leading to point B by a straight line called responsibility. At noon, I moved to an empty stage rehearsal room, set a water bottle by the wings, and worked with a speaking coach. Plant both feet, breathe deep, open a sentence with information, close a sentence with action. Your voice is enough, she said. The rest is to make room for silence. In the afternoon, I sat with the union representative to finalize a fair agreement on shift schedules. Each shift is announced in advance. No last-minute changes. Night workers have recovery time. Days off will truly be days off. We signed the summary, the ink still wet when everyone already breathed half a beat easier. In the evening, I went to the revenue floor, invited the whole team into a simple circle. Brand safety isn't a lock hung on the door, it's how we behave in every meeting. We reviewed the standards, made a list of things we will never accept, and added one line. If anyone is insulted, they have the right to pause the meeting for 1 minute so everyone can take a look back. In another corner, the communications room stayed lit late. We drafted a press release in advance with short, courteous sentences. The station respects workers, handles incidents by procedure, and does not throw blame at any individual. Along with a Q&A for advertisers, answering directly 3 things: content, workplace environment, and how we handle turmoil. On the table, 2 sample letters were laid side by side, one to send to investors if needed, one a short update for the viewing community, all written in a human voice, not a template voice. Night fell. I returned to Tribeca, rehearsed the speech right in the living room, pausing now and then to hear my heartbeat through the sweater. I turned one long sentence into 2 short ones, dropped a surplus adjective, added a thank you. Thank you to the news team for keeping the lights on. Thank you to the people behind the cameras for believing in words. At dawn, I swung by the studio, set a box of donuts on the copy desk, left a sticky note. Thank you for last night. No fireworks, no banners, only that everything be in its right place. People, sentences, and the numbered documents. I looked over the next day's schedule again, meeting with the chair, meeting the union, talking with the revenue team, reviewing the release, and reminded myself, no need to shout, just prepare. And prepare so well that when you step into the lights, the only thing left to do is smile, say good evening, and begin. The night at Radio City Music Hall glowed red like a beating heart in the middle of New York. I stood in the backstage shadows, hearing the murmur of agency buyers, the incessant clicks of the press cameras, and seeing the rows of union representatives' seats glint with small badges. The velvet curtain trembled lightly from the air conditioning, the wooden floor under my feet cool and firm. My husband stepped out first, smile lit by the lights, a smooth voice opening about a new era. Cutting back the newsroom, increasing reality, getting closer to the audience. As I listened, I felt a cold wrinkle run down the nape of the hall. Right then, backstage, a man in a gray suit appeared. A process server. He nodded hello, placed an envelope with a red seal into the assistant's hand. An emergency order from Delaware Chancery. Underneath was a letter from the transfer agent confirming that the special voting rights had shifted according to the trust's instructions. Record the time, the general counsel said quietly through the earpiece, his voice calm as a lake. The stage manager beside me touched a finger to the kill mic button, his eyes asking, "When?" I nodded slightly. "When needed." The lights shifted. The teleprompter had just flickered when the slide suddenly changed, the words on the screen returning to exactly the script I had practiced with the coach. Short, direct, unadorned. I stepped out, unhurried, as if walking into my own living room. In front of me was a sea of people. Behind me, the warmth of the backstage crew I had checked in with every morning. My husband hesitated slightly, his eyes sliding down to the front row where his mother sat, her hand gripping her clutch as if holding a rope. I set my hand on the microphone, heard a very small pop, and inhaled as I had trained. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, keeping my voice at an even level, "on behalf of the board of directors, we respect artists and journalists. The new scheduling policy signed with SAG-AFTRA and IATSE takes effect today." The entire hall suddenly fell quiet, as if a thick cloth had been pulled over the noise. I looked toward the union rows. A few people stood, their eyes a little red. I nodded just once. My husband moved toward me, about to snatch the mic the way he did at town halls. The stage manager's finger touched the button. His mic went dead. What remained of his voice was only an offbeat breath, sinking into the rustle of the curtain. Stage security moved forward without a word. An open hand. A gentle direction. He was invited to the side, no one shoved. I stayed there, hands steady, speaking about specifics. Each shift is announced in advance, no last-minute changes. Verbal harassment will pause the meeting for 1 minute to reflect. And brand safety begins with how we treat the people at home. I didn't name anyone. I named the rules. Then I turned to the revenue team sitting in a Navy block. "We will not sell a single second of airtime by cutting into the newsroom's bone." I saw the head of sales exhale as if setting down a heavy package. In the press section, the old hands lifted their eyebrows, pencils tapping their notebooks. The union representatives stood, walked down the center aisle, and extended their hands. I stepped down one riser and shook them. Applause scattered at first, then thickened like a summer rain. I let it pass through me, claimed none of it, just stood steady like a stage column. In the VIP row, my mother-in-law sat upright like a statue, her lips pressed into a thin line. The lights washed her face to show every line of powder, but her eyes were dark. I didn't look for long. I turned back to the mic and closed. "We do media with truth. Tonight, our truth is respect for workers and audiences." The front lights softened by half a stop. The screen behind me shifted to the station logo with no music, just a calm blue. I bowed once. When I looked up, I saw far too many faces less tense. New York's night was still loud, but inside me was a quiet zone. No need to shout. Just prepare, and at the right moment, say the right line. Here, justice doesn't wear a robe. It stands on stage, measured by handshakes, a mic cut at the right time, and a court-sealed letter resting at ease in an envelope backstage. After the final applause at Radio City, we went straight back to headquarters. The wooden door closed behind us, the board's conference room quiet like a small chapel, only the soft sound of rain touching the glass. "Executive session," the independent chair said, gentle and decisive. Those not involved were invited to step outside. My husband stood up, shot me a very quick glance, then followed security to the door. I placed both hands on my knees to steady myself, remembering the morning's breathing practice with the coach. Inhale for 4, hold for 2, exhale for 4. The general counsel opened the leather folder, laying out on the table in order the time-stamped stock ledger, my grandfather's letter of wishes, the sealed transfer instruction, and the emergency order to preserve the status quo, just stamped by the court. On paper, Every undercurrent became straight lines of text. I suddenly felt grateful for those who kept their pen steady. The chair invited each person to speak briefly. No one spoke for more than a minute. The trustee confirmed the violation triggers activation clause. The special voting rights had returned to the proper place under my grandfather's instruction. The general counsel read slowly. Conduct insulting employees, improper interference with process, and attempts to manipulate family finances, sufficient indicators to be deemed for cause. There were no sighs. Everyone looked at the open minutes. Call for a vote, the chair said. Hands went up, even and firm. The conclusion was entered on the first line. Remove the CEO for cause. Next came another decision. Neat as scissors snipping thread. Clawback bonuses received for dishonest results. Do not use company funds to cover legal defense for misconduct. Propose a separation agreement with a non-disparagement clause and an obligation to cooperate with the investigation. I heard the scratch of pen signing and felt the whole room settle its weight back into the frame of the house. Then came family business mixed into company business. My mother-in-law was mentioned in a completely neutral tone. The board noted a prolonged conflict of interest in the family fund, recommended removing her from the advisory role, and required repayment of improper expenditures. No bitterness, no judgment, just bullet points set in order, voted on, time-stamped, signed. I felt my heart ease. Corporate justice does not scream. It strikes the gavel. The communications plan came on like a warm yellow light. PR sent the release. Respect for workers, reaffirm the commitment to news and artists, announce the leadership change with the transition path. If needed, investor reporting would go out, a brief on-time notice. If not, a letter to private shareholders, in a human voice, not glossy. No comment beyond this document, the chair reminded. Let the record speak. The clock read 6 census to 3 p.m. when the email, press release, for immediate distribution, left the system. I looked at the window. The rain had thinned. Then a gentle moment like a hug. The union representatives returned to the room and, with the general counsel, set on the table a framework agreement on scheduling. The promises made on stage now turned into blue signatures. We stood, shook hands. An internal photographer snapped a quick photo, the hands of labor and the hands of leadership meeting in the middle. No one laughed loudly. Everyone just exhaled longer than usual. When the meeting closed, the chair turned to me. Tomorrow, give a short address in the newsroom. Don't say much. Just thanks and a reminder of the commitment. I nodded. Stepping into the corridor, I saw my mother-in-law sitting alone on the bench opposite the elevators, her hands intertwined as if fingering an invisible rosary. I didn't stop, and I didn't look back. Some goodbyes require silence to be kind. Late at night, I went back to Tribeca and set my phone face down on the wooden table. Notifications buzzed non-stop. The press ran stories. Advertisers sent received. The team messaged sleep early, boss. I silenced the phone and opened the window to let in the night air. Tomorrow there would be much to do. Appoint interim management, settle procedures, hear the voices not yet satisfied. But in this moment I let myself sit still and remember a very old line from my grandfather. The real microphone rests in the hands of those who hold the values. Tonight, that microphone was a ballot, a seal, and a handshake. The rest, time will align by itself. 1 month later, I walked through the glass lobby. The security guard looked up and smiled. Morning, boss. That simple greeting felt like stamping a seal of calm on the new day. No more noise, only the work to be done right. The internal bulletin lit up. 2 investigative programs restored, shifts evenly distributed and announced in advance, Ad revenue holding steady because the sense of safety had returned. I opened an Ask Me Anything all hands, set the mic in the middle of the room for anyone to ask anything, and then stepped back and listened. In the evening, I led my child across the crosswalk in front of the school, the small hand gripping mine as if afraid the autumn wind would carry it away. I blinked and told myself, best revenge is running it right. I don't need flashy billboards. I need a clean balance sheet and people safe when they start their shifts. And I know, if you're reading this far, you've gone with me through closed-door conference rooms, stamped letters, and finally, a door opened by calm. Thank you for always being with revenge and resolve. Every view, every comment of yours is a warm touch on my shoulder in the bustling streets. Thank you for believing that truth can heal, as long as we call things by their right names and do our part correctly. If you've ever been mislabeled as a nanny, a hanger-on, comment 1. If you're moving through and want to continue telling your journey, comment 2. I will read every line. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can meet next season, when the trust wakes up, when sleeping papers find their voice. We will continue, slowly but surely, so that each day opens with a gentle greeting like this morning.